Hey there guys, Aldershot here, and today we're going to go over my current Arcane Orb build I'm using for my wizard in Diablo 3. And we'll also talk about how I've managed to get over 1,000,000 DPS unbuffed. Alright, so we'll go over the build and talk a little bit about DPS stacking and all that sort of stuff. Ever since the release of Reaper of Souls, I've been really enjoying Diablo 3 again, as well with Update 2.0. It has changed the game quite fundamentally for the better, in my opinion. I've actually made an impression video on my thoughts about the updates as well as the expansion. If you haven't seen it already, go check that out. But anyways, let's go into it. So as you can see, right now I don't have any of my Paragon points put in. Alright, it's all at 0 Paragon. My follower is not on me right now, so this is just naked stats right now. Alright, no buffs is currently on me. My DPS is at over 1,000,000. It's getting close to 1.1 million. And my toughness is, it's not the highest. I am a mage after all, or wizard, whatever you want to call it. I'm at 3,000,000 though, unbuffed. It's enough to survive T1 and T2. Alright, and I do have some side gear for when I get into the higher tiers as well, or higher torments, alright. We'll talk about how I've managed to get over the 1,000,000 DPS. First, let's go over the current Arcane Orb build I'm using and some of the synergies with skills and gear that I have going for it. Alright, so first and foremost, obviously we're going to use Arcane Orb. And in Arcane Orb, we're going to use Frozen Orb. And we're using Frozen Orb because it does a lot of damage, and it offers a minor amount of crowd control as well, since it does slow down the mobs. And this will synergize with a passive skill that we're going to talk about in a second as well. So, Frozen Orb is my choice for Arcane Orb. Arcane Orb is great because there's no cooldowns. It just takes arcane energy to use, and it does a pile of damage. It's quite dependable. The only problem is it does take quite a bit of arcane energy when in use. So we are going to use electrocutes to help refill our arcane energy as fast as possible. And in order to do that, we're going to use electrocute with the Surge of Power rune. And this will allow us to gain arcane power each time we hit a target. Alright, so each time we hit a target, we gain 1 arcane power. Alright, so that's going to be really useful, especially when targeting large groups of enemies, and you'll be regenning a whole pile of arcane energy whenever you do target a large group with electrocute. And this build is exceptionally good at killing large groups of mobs as well. In fact, the more mobs around your target, the more powerful this build will become, and we'll go over that in a little bit. We are going to use energy armor for a little bit of defensive protection, but we're also using it mainly for pinpoint barrier to increase our critical hit chance. Now, critical hit chance is going to synergize with our build. It will partner up with a piece in our gear, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. Alright, so critical hit percentage is going to be pretty important to this build. Now over here we are going to use magic weapon to help increase our DPS. We are going to be very concerned with a DPS stacking for this build. Alright, so magic weapon is going to be quite good for it. Now, the common sense thing to do when DPS stacking is to use force weapon, as it will increase our DPS even more, but instead we're going to use ignite, and there's a very specific reason why we're going to do that. We'll go over it again as we talk about this build. It's going to synergize with a skill down the road. And then we're going to use familiar, and with the familiar we're going to use spark flint for the sake of even more DPS stacking. That's really the only reason. Alright, over here we are going to use Archon. Now this is what I call the flavor slot. You can actually replace the slot with either black hole or teleport with wormhole and do quite well. Alright, now with Archon, it gives me more DPS potential. When I fight elites, I use improved Archon, pop Archon, and just annihilate elites in T1 and T2. Alright, only take a few seconds. I'm going to be like smashing them in the face for anywhere between 22 million to 40 million per smash. Alright, not including the explosion radius, not even including the big laser beam that it shoots. Alright, so So it does quite a bit of damage. Of course, with Black Hole, you'll have more crowd control potential, and with Teleport, you'll have more survivability potential. So it's really up to you, depending on the gear that you're using and how you feel like playing this build. Feel free to replace this slot as you please. Again, I choose Archon for higher DPS potential. It basically allows me to clear elites as fast as possible, especially the troublesome ones that likes to immobilize and freeze. They are an issue for this build a little bit, as common strategy is going to be kiting, and we'll get more into that down the road as well. Alright, so there are the main skills that we're going to be using as far as active skills go. Your main attack is going to be Arcane Orb. You're going to try to use Arcane Orb as much as possible, and in order to do that, we use Electrocute to recharge ourselves so we can go back into Arcane Orb. Now for our passives, we are going to use Prodigy for much of the same reason why we're using Electrocute with Surge of Power, to help regenerate our arcane power as fast as possible. So whenever we do an attack, and Electrocute does attack quite quickly, we gain 5 arcane power, which helps refill us quite quickly. Alright, and attack speed stacking is going to be very, very important in supports of Prodigy, because the faster you attack, the more effective Prodigy will become, and the faster you'll recharge your arcane power. And that's what this build's really all about. It's about damage stacking and recharging our arcane power as fast as possible. So that way we can make our Arcane Orb as powerful as possible, as well as going back into the use of Arcane Orb as fast as possible. Alright, so since we're using Frozen Orb, we're going to use Cold Blooded for a little bit more DPS stacking. Alright, so any mobs that aren't insta-gibbed by the first Arcane Orb, they will take an additional 10% more damage on the next hit, almost guaranteeing you at least a 2-shot, at least with trash mobs. Alright, this is especially effective against elites when your your Archon is down. This will make sure that your Arcane Orb is going to hit very, very hard. Alright, our next skill is Conflagration, and this is why we're using Ignite in Magic Weapon. Alright, what Ignite does is it turns all our attack into burning. Alright, so anything that gets hit will burn, and with Ignite, anything that's burning will gain an extra 6% chance of being crit. Alright, and again, I mentioned crit percentage is actually quite synergistic and quite important to this build, so we want to stack as much critical hits as possible, as well as attack speed. Alright, and now we're going to use Blur. Now this can be replaced with Glass Cannon if you feel you have enough defense. I feel I don't, so I'm using Blur for that extra bit of survivability. But, you know, again, if you feel a little bit more dangerous, or you feel you can handle the pain, so to speak, feel free to use Glass Cannon, as that will obviously improve your DPS, and that's what this build's all about. So I'll show you my gear as well for this build. Alright. So this is going to be one of the most important pieces to this gear, or to this build here. It is Mykin's Ball of Hate, and what makes this so special is that it allows my Electrocute to chain to enemies multiple times rather than just once. And that will feed into our Prodigy as well as our Surge of Power rune, as it will attack more, therefore recharging our arcane power even faster. And with all those extra hits, is a higher chance of scoring even more critical hits. Alright, and here's the reason why we want to score critical hits and why we want to stack critical hit chance, is because with the same source here, we gain an additional 4 arcane power every time something we do crits. So again, that feeds into our arcane power, recharging our arcane power even faster, allowing us to go back into Arcane Orb as quickly as possible. So as you can see, Mykin's Ball of Hate is quite important to this build, is very much is the engine of this build. It does allow our Electrocute to generate more arcane power. Well, obviously it allows it to do more DPS, which is a very, very nice side effect, but it also recharges our arcane power through crits as well. Ideally, we would have arcane power on crits on our helm as well, but unfortunately I rolled a broken crown that wasn't viable for that stat. I really need the critical hit chance for both DPS as well to synergize with the 4 arcane power on crits as well. But ideally I would probably replace the vitality with arcane power on crits, but this is still a very good crown as it does give attack speed, and that's kind of rare for a headpiece. Alright, and we are using a level 60 Tal Raja's Relentless Pursuit, and the reason being is because I haven't found level 70 yet, and I don't want to lose the attack speed, which is quite a major piece, 9% attack speed, from my level 60 Tal Raja's Relentless Pursuit. Alright, and that goes the same for our Witching Hour as well. That is a level 60 Witching Hour. I've yet to find a level 70. I'm not even sure if level 70 Witching Hours are as good as this has a roll of crit damage increase as well as attack speed increase. Alright, so that's very, very good for this build, as we do crit quite a lot. So having crit damage increases is very, very good for a DPS. And attack speed, again, to feed into our arcane power recharging station, essentially. Alright, as far as pants and boots go, just get a pair of pants with 2 slots. Fill it with as high of a intellect stone or gem as you possibly can, and the rest worry about more on the toughness side of things. You're going to get a lot of your toughness from your shoulders, pants, and your boots, as the rest of your gear should be prioritized towards DPS. So it is important to have good defensive rolls on both your boots as well as your pants. Alright, now as far as your boots is concerned, I rolled armor. You could very well re-roll that. You want to be a little bit more DPS. Re-roll that for an elemental damage or something of that sort. Alright. Let's see. Ideally, my boots would be ice climbers to help me with immobilization as well as freezing, but I've yet to find a pair, so I'm just using firewalkers as a placeholder. Alright. Now I'm also using Shantoto's Will. It's just a very, very good wand that's doing a lot of DPS for me. It has attack speed, which is very, very important to this build. And once again, and make sure you roll a gem slot for your weapon as well. That's going to be absolutely essential because you want the highest gem as an emerald to increase your critical hit damage. Alright, it's a major, major increase. It's one of the biggest that you'll find in any slot, so it's absolutely important that you do roll a slot for that. Alright, and for the shoulders, we are using Spalders of Zakera. I think that's how you pronounce it. Now this shoulder is quite a gem. I like this a lot. It gives me a lot of toughness, which this build kind of lacks. But most importantly is this signature stat. My items become indestructible. This is, now I'm playing in softcore. I'm not a hardcore player, so do keep that in mind. But this little piece of equipment here basically allows me to not worry about death so much. That allows me to neglect toughness stat building and really focus into my DPS stacking. So dying won't cost me a repair bill, so that's a huge downside of dying that's completely neglected, which is absolutely fantastic. I love these shoulders. These are so far my favorite that I found in the game. You're going to want a good trifecta amulets. You're going to want intelligence roll, obviously. Attack speed is very, very important for this build, so you're definitely going to want attack speed above all else. And then try your best to get critical hit damage as well as critical hit chance. And as far as your gloves is concerned, generally speaking, Mage Fist would be ideal, would probably be the best in slot, because it does help out with our minor amounts of burning from our inflagration skill, or from our Ignite rune, I should say. But I made these Pender's Purchase, and they increased the damage from my previous Mage Fist quite significantly, so I decided to use that for the time being until I find a better Mage Fist. It does give me my trifecta stats I needed: attack speed, critical hit chance, and critical hit damage. So I think you guys are starting to see a pattern. It's really about stacking critical hit chance, critical hit damage, attack speed, and obviously intelligence. For the sake of this build, the most important enlisting, I would say, is attack speed, then critical hit chance, then critical hit damage. Alright. For our bracers, you're going to want an elemental increase to help with your Arcane Orb. I'm using cold skill, so I want to increase the cold skill damage, then go for critical hit chance. Then the rest, fill it with intelligence and one more stat piece for any kind of toughness stat you want to choose, either resist all or vitality. Alright, so for our rings, similar thing to our amulet, you're going to want trifecta stats, essentially, as high as you possibly can roll it. And that's generally how I rolled over 1,000,000 DPS. Now, we're going to go into our paragons and show you how I handle that. For our core stats, we're going to fill movement speed as much as possible. If you roll movement speed in your boots, try to get rid of it, because you can get max movement roll, as in plus 25% once you hit Paragon level 200. I'm not quite there yet, I'm pretty close, but so right now I'm at 22% movement speed, which is still pretty damn good. Alright, I'm only 3% off. That's why I prefer no movement speed in any of my gear stats, as that slot could be used for something much more important, such as DPS or even toughness. Now for offense, alright, most people will go for critical hit chance. It's not a bad choice for this build, but we will actually benefit a lot more from attack speed, because we actually have two skills that benefit directly from attack speed, and only one piece of gear that benefit directly from critical hit chance. So we're getting more synergy from attack speed in this build, so we're going to maximize that as much as possible. After you maximize that, after level 200 and Paragon levels, probably hit up the critical hit chance. Alright, and as far as core, I think it's pretty obvious we should hit up intelligence after the movement speed. Now for defense, we're going to go right into resist all, and after that, once we max that, we're going to go into armor. Alright, I think damage mitigation can be handled quite well in just paragons, and having a bit of vitality on your gear is not going to hurt. I know a lot of people bitch about having vitality as toughness stats, but keeping in mind your pots heal 60% of your health. So the more maximum health you have, the more your pots will heal you. And let's admit it, pots are one of the most reliable ways to heal yourself. Alright, as you don't really want to stack healing stats on your gear for this build, because you really want to focus in on DPS, and whatever leftover slots you have, you're going to want it for toughness over healing, as healing is kind of nerfed quite significantly in version 2.0. Now for utility, we're going to go straight into area damage, because this is a very, very good build against large groups, and not putting into area damage will actually nerf your potential damage quite significantly. Alright, so definitely throw in your stats into area damage. Don't get area damage on your gear. You can fill as much as you need in your Paragon levels alone. So you can save those slots for something more important, such as crit chance, attack speed, crit damage, intelligence, vitality, resist all armor. Those are much more important stats than area damage. Alright, but once we're done that, we'll probably hit up resource cost reduction, as that will help us cast more arcane orbs as we go. Alright, so that's basically how I built this tune here. Let's see, we'll throw on our full buffs. Alright, and right now with blur on, we're at 1.4, almost close to 1.5 mil DPS on paper. Alright, if we go into our skills and we switch to glass cannon, which I do from time to time, we will be at close to 1.7 million DPS. So as you can see, this build here is actually quite powerful. Now I do know I've seen wizards with even higher DPS than me. I'm not saying this is the perfect build or that my build is absolutely the best. I just want to show what I'm running and how I've handled it. Alright, so that's essentially how this is going to work. And I don't want to drag this video on any longer, so at the end of this little tutorial, I will kind of edit in a Rift run that I've done in Torment 1 with this exact build, fully buffed, and with my follower as well. And just to show you how it's going to function in combat. Now, the reason I'm doing it in T1s for a few reasons. First and foremost, those who are watching this video looking for a good build on Wizards, more than likely they're going to enter T1 before they hit T2 or T3, if they even should. So that's going to give them a better idea of what to expect when they get into the game with this build. And for those who are watching who's just curious about the build, who are quite knowledgeable about this game, they will have enough knowledge and experience to adjust their expectations based on my T1's run. So that's why I feel T1's most appropriate to kind of capture, to exemplify this build. And another reason is because I find a lot of players, even the more expert players, tend to grind on T1, as is generally speaking, by the numbers, it's more efficient. You know, it's like just because you can run T3 because you have a strong character doesn't necessarily mean it's efficient to run it. Running a pile of T1 rifts over running a few T3 rifts could potentially net you higher legendary drop rates. Not potentially, but by the numbers, it will net you higher legendaries than running higher tier tournament levels. But at the same time, some people just get bored of it. I understand why people do run higher tier tournaments, so I'm not downing on that whatsoever. So there you go, guys. That's basically how I've ran this build. It's been quite effective for me. If you guys have any questions, feel free to leave it in the comments. I will reply to your questions as quickly as possible. Well, thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this, if you found this informative in any way, do leave me, send me some love, like, share, fave, and comment. But most importantly, please subscribe, help me grow, and feed me my vegetables. Thanks for watching, guys. All the shout outs.
Brave the rifts, and you will be well rewarded.
See me now. out.